We might 5 years.
Yeah, you could have, I should have thought, because you could have then just shared.
So we didn't know there was going to be a problem. You know, so, I mean, I knew mine was a problem.
Is it 4:30?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you. So I'll just start the meeting. Obviously, this is the first Museum and Archive Committee meeting since the new council formed in May 2023. So thank you for members that are attending this afternoon. So the first item on the agenda is to elect a chair. So I would like to invite nominations, please.
I'm quite happy to.
I was going to nominate Councillor Carlton there.
Oh, right, okay, I don't have to do it myself, thank you.
So Councillor Franklin's nominated Councillor Carter. Is there anyone to second that nomination?
Yeah.
Got chair one committee, didn't you?
I was going to say I'm getting lazy.
Are you happy all to vote on that? Yeah. So that's agreed.
Just remind me how to
Thank you. That's agreed. The Mayor is the chair of the Museum and Archive Committee, so I'll hand over to the Mayor. Thank you.
Oh, super, thank you, that's a very lovely short introduction there. Okay then, moving forward, first of all I'd like to say welcome actually, because this is a new start. So I see this as a new venture going forward, and with all the great works that the museum coordinator's done up to date, I see this as a great start of assisting and helping the museum coordinator to take our museum to the top if it's not already there. So welcome to this new meeting this evening. Okay, item number 2 is apologies for absence received. Do we have any apologies, Town Clerk?
We do, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So apologies from Councillor Black, travel commitment. Apologies from Councillor Mallet, who is ill, and Councillor Marie, a work commitment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, and we'll excuse them from this evening. Item number 3 is declarations of interest, and this is to receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests from members in respect of business that is to be transacted on the agenda this evening. Do I have any declarations? No, looks like a no. Okay, that's down there. Item number 4 is public participation, and a 20-minute session is set aside for members of the public to make representations at this meeting in respect of the business on the agenda. Individual representation should not exceed 5 minutes. Within written notice of the desire to exercise the right to speak, together with the topic to be addressed, must be given to the Town Clerk prior to noon on the day of the meeting. Do we have any public participants?
None.
None this evening. Oh, what a shame. We'll have to do better, won't we? Item number 5 is terms of reference, and the committee members are to receive and to note the adopted terms of reference for this committee. Please refer to attachments 1 and 1A, please. And as is usual, I'm asking the committee if they're happy to note the terms of reference that were adopted by the council on the 30th of October 2023. Councillor Franklin and Councillor Anderson, and all those in favour of adopting the terms?
Yeah, thank you.
Unanimous, Stephen. Thank you very much for that. So, and item number 6 is an update on operations, and members are to receive and note an update on operations from the museum coordinator, and this is attachment number 2. So are we having
Are you happy with me to
did you
speak
want to?
If not.
There's quite a lot to say.
Yeah.
I did an update. I mean, I'll mention that the update covers
Thank you.
previous years and last year's information and up until now for this year. To give some context, it won't be as long as this in the future. It will, you know, it might give some information for context so you can understand if we're improving and things like that. But generally, it won't be quite as long as this. So, you know, I'm aware it's quite big. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I think it's useful as well because obviously this is a newly formed committee following the election. So thank you, Millie, because that's really informative for everybody to know the background as well.
Indeed.
Everyone has comments.
Yeah, I would like to start the comments off, and I'd like to say that I was very pleasantly surprised, and I was thought that this report was very well put together. It was very nice to see the comparison of figures, particularly the donations. I think that was excellent to see how good they're going on. It's very good to see the feedback about the volunteers, what's happening about the volunteers and the recruitment of the volunteers. As I said, as with the last gathering, I believe was December 22, and we're hoping to go forward with a volunteers gathering early in the spring of 24, so hopefully not too much longer to go until we can thank the museum volunteers there. Also to do with the inclusion of the schools. I think that's very, very important, so I think that was really good there. And just to follow up with, it's nice to see that the works going forward are the accreditation and the inventory work that are going ahead. So I was sort of really pleased to see this report, and if it's shorter next time, then so be it, but I thought it was a really excellent report and very professionally put together, so thank you very much for delivering that report to us. Are there any other comments at all on this report, please?
No, it's very good.
Yeah.
Indeed,
Yeah,
Councillor
I
Anderson.
thought it was excellent too, and very interesting to have this comparative data, particularly on the income and numbers of visitors. I suspect, I slightly hesitate to raise this, but I think there might be pressure, given the financial position that the Tollbridge Fund is in, that there will be pressure to introduce charging for the museum. And I think we have to be, personally, I don't want the museum to be charged for. I think it's a fine principle that this country has, that museums should be free because they're part of the contribution to education and culture, which I feel the state should take some responsibility for, and we are part of the state. So I think we should, if possible, retain free admission, but I think there might be some pressure coming, and it would be helpful to have some data on what the position was when museum entry was charged for, and what the visitor numbers
I
were
can
then.
answer some of that.
Okay.
I've heard mixed information about what was actually charged. I thought it was £1, I also heard someone say it was £2.
I think it was £1.
Yeah. But I do know that I think the last year that it was charged for, we had 1,500 visitors, and then when that charge was removed, it went to 15,000.
Yes. And would that 15,000, most of them have made a donation, do you think? Because that's always the pressure at the front of the museum, you know, you're sort of half expected. The same is true, I'm afraid, of cathedrals. You're told, you know, we expect you to give £5 or a sum. And
so there are plans to, well, hopefully in the future, with some of the maintenance and adjustments in the museum, to improve the messaging around donations and perhaps give people an idea of for example, £5 helps us do this, £10 helps us do this, things like that. What I would say though that's quite important to think about is that we are, it's important to be inclusive. Some people can't afford to pay to come into a museum.
Right.
If there's a family, then you know they're paying a fee in theory for their children as well. That's quite a lot of money. Whereas someone might donate £10, sometimes they've covered the entrance of a
Yes.
family of people.
Yes.
And I think that's really important.
Yes, I think
Bear in
that's
mind.
right. I mean, it's a fine line to tread, but I think we do have to be aware, and I think your ideas about pointing out to people what we could do with whatever they decide to give us.
So, I beg your pardon.
Councillor Ripley?
I just want to say that I think charging is completely counterproductive in terms of visitor numbers, and particularly as Millie said, when there's large numbers of children involved and you know what have you. But as a museum volunteer, I have to say that nowhere near everybody gives a donation. That's fine, fair enough, because then people do give £5, £10, whatever. But it certainly isn't the majority of people. I do think your idea, Millie, about having, you know, signs about what the money would be useful for is a very good idea.
Yes, I think so.
Councillor
Yes,
Fortescue?
so what happens at the moment, is there a collecting box at the entrance of the museum?
Yeah, there's a donation box with some messaging on it. I have updated that to be a bit more colourful as well recently, just because it wasn't very obvious before. And then we have the till, which we can take card donations through. I am aware that that can be a difficult thing sometimes, because it's up to the person, member of staff, volunteer, to put in how much someone, so you have to ask them how much they want to give, and that is a sort of, I think, perhaps can deter people, because there's an element of pressure. In a way it's helpful for us, but it's something I'm aware of. I have thought about a donation point that is a repeat payment, so it'll be literally a card reader with some information. It doesn't have to be by the till, and it might have a specific £5, for example, and it will be contactless. So you just tap the card and it does it, and it basically reduces the amount of time people have to think about whether they want to do it or not, because they've done it. But there's a worry about that, whether or not that would stop then people putting cash in the donation box. Sometimes people might put in £10, so if we say then have a card reader that takes £5 and it's much more convenient to use, is that going to reduce the cash we take? These are things that we have to weigh up, that I'm aware of.
But then I have seen a lot of people who don't have cash. I mean, let's be honest, you know, there's a lot of people these days, including me, who don't carry a lot of cash. Then they see that they can do it via the till, and then they discover that you're not very good at working it via the till. It's all a bit off-putting. So I think something that would be quick and convenient is a very good idea, actually. It doesn't involve inept volunteers.
Yeah.
I was going to say, last weekend I was up in London, and I went to 2 galleries up there, and they had QR codes, and literally, because the problem is not me, but younger people tend to, including both my daughters, use their phones to pay for everything. And so if you just have like a barcode or a QR code with just a set fee, one of them was as low as £3 where I went to, and literally you just put your phone on it and then it would take the £3. So, and I thought that was quite good. I saw quite a lot of people actually as they were filing in. It was as they were filing in, and actually the majority of people were going along and doing this barcode thing just for £3. So apart from old fogies like me who didn't have that facility on his phone. So.
I'll just say something.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm totally against paying. I remember I used to volunteer and people used to pay. They walk up the door, so you got to pay and walk back again. And I thought, when you've got children, you think it's so welcoming and say it's free.
Yes, that's right.
And I went to Faversham recently, and it's all free there as well. So
Yes.
I think it's a deterrent if you suddenly put a charm and hope for the perhaps a better sign for donations or what it's going to be spent for, hasn't it?
Well,
Exactly.
Good
I
idea.
just want to say I'm so pleased that we seem to be united about that the museum should remain free.
Yeah.
But I think also we should have some method of raising income. And I seem to remember the last time I went to the Kent Mining Museum, I think they do have an automatic system, because I remember tapping my card and
Most places will.
St. Peter's Church,
It was a system.
Yeah.
I believe you can set it up so that people can, so we might have 3 different amounts and they can change the amount they choose, but then again, that does allow for sort of thinking time to consider whether or not they actually want to donate in the first place. I think the first step is the wall that is currently damp and doesn't have the custom wall anymore is the kind of place that I think would be the most suitable for messaging about donating. And I think the first step is probably get that messaging there and information about how people can support us. I don't think it says anywhere that we're a charity, for example, things like that.
yes.
It does help the volunteers. People come in and ask if they have to pay, and usually most volunteers will say, you know, we're a charity, or you know, you can make a donation, things like that. But having that messaging there is important. So I think that's probably the first step.
Yeah.
And
then
it's better
it's
to have it
from there.
because it catches them on the way out.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's excellent. Thank you very much for that. So the committee is asked to receive and note this report.
Yeah.
Would anybody like to propose?
Yeah.
Councillor Franklin
Second.
and Councillor Anderson second. All those in favour of the operations report, please raise your hand.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you very much. So, item number 7 is co-opted committee members. Members to receive a report regarding co-opted members for the committee. Decisions are required, and this is attachment number 3. And on this one here, it's a case of who to, if there's any members that we deem to co-opt onto this. I see that the museum coordinator had asked for somebody with finance and budget knowledge, and also perhaps somebody with educational knowledge, and then to advertise for anybody else that we think would be of benefit to this committee. I'd just like to point out, obviously, if we made the committee too large, the more people you have to discuss an issue, the more solutions you actually get instead of answers. So obviously it'd be good to have people that have got the right knowledge and experience and ideas that would benefit this committee in the long term here. I don't know if anybody had any ideas of taking this forward at all. Museum coordinator, did you have any ideas with these, the ones that you had highlighted? Did you have anybody in mind at all for any of these positions?
I haven't, there's no one specific that I've thought of, but the idea was hopefully that if we could specify finances and education as experience and kind of knowledge that would be useful, that we could perhaps advertise them and interview the way you would for a trustee board, you know, in a different, with a different governance structure. Obviously, a museum looks slightly different, so that myself and probably you and the town clerk could work together on it's almost like a role description, so they could support me, perhaps provide a little bit of time to assist on some of those areas, but also be able to sit on the committee and report in relation to them and think of new ideas for the museum.
Indeed, that'd be a good idea. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I think this specifying the kind of person that we need on this committee is a very good idea. I know that from, you know, working with organisations in Sandwich, it's very difficult to find financial people, and that's a problem. So we may not get very far. As far as the education is concerned, are we talking somebody with experience in secondary education or primary education? What were you thinking of?
I think, well, ideally someone that has, I mean, I think the knowledge is obviously if someone understands the curriculum in one area, it is a bit more transferable. They're more likely to understand it in a different area than I am, probably, because it's not part of my role. However, I think probably primary is the best start, because their learning is cross-curricular, so they can come to a museum and they can do English, art, history in one go, whereas secondary they study individual subjects. So it's probably the best way to start, I would say. And then I think develop from there, I'd say, at the start of primary.
Well, it might be worth just approaching the head teachers of Sandwich Infants and Sandwich Juniors and seeing whether they could suggest somebody. The other thing I was going to say is I do know that living in Sandwich is a retired curator of a major archive in London. Now, I don't know whether that's the kind of person that you would also welcome. I have absolutely no idea whether he would be interested. He may say, been there, done that, and I've no idea. But, I mean, is that the sort of expertise that you would also be interested in having?
I think what would be a good start is to think about the two that we specified, and then the option of thinking about what the museum might need, what knowledge or skills they might need, that might be needed, and then follow the same process of recruiting, specifying that knowledge. I don't know that we need someone with that knowledge at this stage, unless he would like to be a volunteer, in which case that would be very useful.
And then he scuttled away. So that maybe, you know, as I say, been there, done that. But
what I might just add about the finances related role, that was raised as something that another museum's done in some training I had recently, and they talked about approaching local accountants and things like that, and talking to if there's trainees that, you know, they have enough knowledge to be able to support us, but perhaps aren't really high up that they were willing to give their time. So that's where that idea came from.
So going forward, perhaps the best idea is, as the museum coordinator said, to perhaps draft out a role between 2 or 3 of us. We could draft out a role and then perhaps put this into the public realm and see what sort of inquiries we get back as to whether they would fit into what we require at this stage of the game, and then quite possibly later on, as different aspects of the museum crop up, perhaps we could do short-term co-options for your expert from London.
living in Sandwich.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
Yeah, it could be a temporary position with potential to extend it, you know, depending on what the projects they're doing, and then we can co-opt again. I mean, it's quite standard, I think, in museums. Obviously, it's different for us because of the structure, but to change your trustee board to suit what is happening, so it might be worth. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, there was a chap who used to work at Greenwich, the town mentor.
There was,
He used to go to the church, didn't
He
he?
did. I don't know if he's still here.
He's getting married on the sandwich.
Yeah,
Interesting, isn't
it would be. Yeah,
So who's that?
that's right.
It's just well, I met him through Pfizer's. He was at Pfizer's librarian. Then he got a job at Greenwich Maritime Museum, one of the creators of Greenwich. and he still lives out locally, so he's retired. So.
Yeah, if he's still in the church,
Yeah.
might be quite welcome there, so.
I think the church would be.
He was at one time, yeah. So the committee's asked to approve the request to recruit a co-opted member with expertise of finance and budgeting. The committee is asked to approve the request to recruit a co-opted member with expertise in education, and the committee is asked to approve the request that any other co-opted members are also selected via a recruitment process, which the three of us can work on in the meantime. Is everybody happy with that proposal to go forward? If that's okay. Could I just have a proposal and second? Thank you.
Yeah.
And all those in favour of those options? Thank you very much. That's very good. That's very good. And then item number 8 is the accreditation requirements. Our members are to receive and note a report regarding the museum accreditation system requirements, and this is attachment 4 and 4A. And this is quite a major undertaking. It's something I've spoken to the museum coordinator about this already, and I likened it to, which possibly, I don't know if that would be the same for Councillor Anderson and Fortescue, but similar to the Ofsted that you get in schools, because with the Ofsted you have members of the government coming to your school literally with very short notice, and then asking for literally all the documentation and policies and everything like that. But quite luckily in this process, I believe the accreditation process, when we're asked to undertake the return, we've got 6 months, I believe, is it, to complete this. So
6 months to submit
submit
the application with all the attached policies and approval of all of those, anything they ask us to have.
And we don't know exactly when, but we know it'll be 2024, but we don't know when in the year.
So what we know is it was delayed because of the pandemic. So I believe we were last accredited in 2016, so it was expected around 2020 or 2021, but they had a backlog. And we weren't called this year, so we can expect it could be 2025, but we have to kind of, I've been thinking about it as if it is, we're asked in January of 24, we've got 6 months, because that could happen.
Yeah.
And with this accreditation, I think the only question or query I had was, obviously it'd be sort of prudent to undertake as much in advance as possible, expecting it to come earlier rather than later. And did you have the support, staff support, to continue with this at all? When both sort of beforehand and when it actually takes place?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the key things is what they do say, the Arts Council, who sort of evaluates all of our policies, that we should have all of these things in place and a forward plan anyway. We shouldn't be doing them before accreditation.
No.
However, none of them have been in place or updated for a couple of years. Some of them I can't find the previous documents if there is one. So we are mostly starting from scratch in that sense with all of the policies and plans we need. So yeah, I think I've in terms of support, there's lots of resources. South East Museums Development really supportive and helpful. It's a case of having the policies approved because there are more to come, I think, is the key thing. But the ones that there's a mission statement and 2 policies on this agenda.
Exactly.
There's other documents that have to be written, and I've been working on quite a lot of them, so
Oh, brilliant.
yeah,
Oh, that's
they are
excellent.
happening. They're just not necessarily highlighted on here
I see.
because they're not finished yet.
Oh, that's good news. Oh, excellent. Oh, that's That's good to know. Did anybody else have any other questions or queries on the accreditation process at all that they'd like to put to the museum coordinator?
I think it's important that we're up to date because we need this when we have loans from other museums, don't we? So we're not accredited. We ask for loans from Bodleian or any other one, like Liverpool. We've got a lot of sacks and stuff up at Liverpool. So I think we should get a hand. It'd be nice to go about as a seasonal, for 6 months loan. So I think it's important we are accredited. And I think it helps us getting grants, I think.
I was just going to say the same. I think for the grants, I think it's essential.
It's a lot of work, but it's important.
It is, yeah. So,
Can I just ask?
oh, indeed, thanks.
I don't want to put pressure on, but I mean, I take what Councillor Franklin and Councillor Carter have said about the importance of getting these documents in place, policies in place. Do we have a notional timetable of when they might be done?
So the past forward plan ended last year, but then we weren't really in a position to produce a new one, partly because we didn't have a committee. But I did write an interim plan, and the main part of that plan was a timetable of getting these policies done. But this also serves as that, so that we can see what needs to be done and where. I know there's not time limits on it, but there is on the previous one, but part of the time limit actually relies on it being approved, because it doesn't mean anything if I've written it and it's not approved. So
Yes,
That's-
which brings me to another question, because we're only, as a committee, going to be meeting quarterly.
Mhm.
So it's just possible that we'll need to meet rather early.
yeah, we will have to probably call another meeting.
Yes. Because, I mean, Councillor Carter referred to Councillor Fortescue and myself being engaged in education in our previous lives. We were in higher education, and universities were assessed on the basis of their research and their teaching quality. And I have to say that the amount of time that was needed to do that kind of work, the lead-ins were 2 or 3 years. So, and we knew exactly when they were going to happen, which was helpful. But it's a hell of a lot of work, and I think obviously a great deal of that work is already underway, but we need to be aware that
Most definitely.
this has to be a top priority.
Most definitely, yeah. I think the main item to note has been raised is the necessity for perhaps an extraordinary meeting if we get the notification that it's coming sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
As I say, the next quarterly meeting would be well into the new year, wouldn't it? So, so the recommendation is members are asked to note the details and requirements of the museum accreditation. So could I have a proposer and a second? Councillor Franklin, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Item number 9 is the organisational health check and the AIM hire package. Members are to receive and note the organisational health check report from South East Museums Development, and this is attachment 5 and 5A. And I'll just sort of start off by saying this was something that the museum coordinator had involved myself and the town clerk with, and I thought it was an excellent idea. It was really, really good, and I think it helps us to move forward. So I think this is really, really good, this one. And the funding that can be applied for as well would be really helpful, would be really useful if we can get that underway. I was really impressed with this document, and I just think it's amazing from what there was years ago to what we have now for museums to actually maintain an exceptionally high standard. So I thought it was really good. I don't know if anybody else got any other comments about this document at all, or about the health check scheme, or even the requirement to undertake funding. But please open the floor.
I do have some updates actually that have happened in the last few days.
Oh, thank you.
At the Tollbridge Fund meeting, I was given approval to go ahead and apply for the funding and the AIM hire package. South East Museums Development were basically so the AIM is the Association of Independent Museums, and they gave South East Museums 4 of these packages, I suppose, for museums in the South East. They have allocated one to us.
Oh, brilliant.
So that is sorted, and I have been in contact with them and chosen a consultant, and I've just spoken to her. So part of choosing them, they have a list of consultants that they use on their website. Hold on, because there's 2 separate things. So that is the AIM consultant. The organisational health check funding, there's £2,000 available. I've just submitted the application. South East Museums agreed that I could submit a generic application stating what I'd like to do, but without kind of itemising what I would spend the money on the understanding that we would use that money to give us more time with the consultant. So through the AIM hire package, we get 2 days of consultancy time. So I've just sent an email to ask if that person would be happy to provide more time or give us a quote for some further work, which is highlighted in the report here. So it's happening. The AIM want ideally that to be done before the end of the financial year, so I've specified that as a time frame in my funding application. So hopefully we get that, but if we don't, we do still have 2 days from the consultant guaranteed. And the main areas, they were in so there was a section of this in the Tollbridge Fund report, so you were aware of what exactly it might be for. But the areas that we're looking at are governance and kind of support and training in relation to the committee, and support in particular to help with the new forward plan and the budget in relation to that. And then there's some other elements that are there, but those are the priorities, and the other elements might be done after the consultancy, but with advice from the consultant. But at the moment, I need to have a meeting with them and work through how it will work and what we can use their time for. But the committee is likely to be asked to be involved in that, in a meeting or something. I'm sure the consultant will need to meet with the committee.
Excellent.
That's brilliant news.
That's really good news. That's fantastic.
Can I just ask a question? Because there was a lot to read, and sometimes my eyes see over things. I seem to remember, but I'm not sure if it was in this document, that there's grants available for moving collections. £30,000, I thought I spotted. But is that under another document?
It doesn't ring a bell with something I have seen.
I seem to recall that as well. So
That's
£30,000.
So I'll have a look through the information I have. I will say, if you're thinking in relation to our collection,
Yeah.
they generally don't like to fund things that have already started. So
right.
we might run into problems there, I would say.
Okay.
But I will see what I can find. I'll double check, and if not, I'll contact South East Museums.
I think it might have been in this document or in another. I can't remember, but there's certainly, it caught my eye.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think this council really must develop an outside funding culture.
Indeed.
That's what everybody else does, so I can't see what we do.
It is. And it's quite nice. I'd just like to say it's quite nice being in the position of being mayor. You go to visit other towns locally, and it's really nice to actually be able to go to those other towns
Mm.
and be very proud
Oh, just be here.
of the museum that we've got here, which is very good. And quite often myself and the Mayor of Deal have sort of humorous exchanges, and I always crop up with saying, oh well, we've got, you know, an award-winning museum, you know, that's of such a high standard and so well thought of, you know, so, and it's nice to make those exchanges. I think the only other one, Faversham, unfortunately, they've got
Oh, yeah.
quite well,
Perfect, make the cards, haven't they?
quite a good setup in Faversham, so
Yeah.
I've been to Faversham to try and see if we can steal any of their ideas, but I'm sure we're well on our way to equaling them, or in fact trumping them, so which is really good.
They haven't got a charter of the forest.
They haven't.
That's a bad idea, is it? Oh, they do it. So I used to do.
So members are asked to note the organisational health check report from SEMS. Are we happy to do that if we have no issues? So Councillor Franklin and Councillor Ripley, and all those in favour of the report?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then item number 10. Item number 10 I was quite excited about when the museum coordinator told me about this, and this is museum branding. Members are to receive a report regarding the museum's branding, and a decision is required on this, and this was attachments 6A and 6B, and I thought this was it was like a breath of fresh air when I was told about this, because I think it's quite nice for organisations. Quite often organisations have a brand or have a logo which is perhaps 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, and it was suitable for when it was first brought into being, and the branding was thought to be perhaps go ahead and contemporary for the time, but then obviously these things become very stale, and so I'm very much in favour myself of supporting this, but I'd like any comments from the committee as to this venture of going forward with this branding. So please speak up if you have any comments on this.
I think our branding is sort of 19th century, moving into the 21st century. You need something visual, don't you, to grab people? Sort of.
Very much.
We do have a museum logo, don't we, which
Well,
that
Guildhall.
survey that came out.
Yeah.
And I was struck, it seemed very child orientated. It's a childish design, and we aren't actually offering that much for children. And I imagine that most visitors are not children. I don't know. I have no idea. But I also know that organisations can spend months arguing, falling out with each other about a wretched logo. And I'm not absolutely convinced that it's that important. So, and it's expensive and it takes time. But anyway, I'm not sure we need to give it top priority.
No, of course. No. Councillor Ripley, did you?
I quite like it, childish.
Oh, you do? Oh gosh. Wow.
But that's if we are attracted. Does it work? Is it effective?
Different, isn't it?
Do we get children coming?
Yes, we do.
Lots.
Yes.
Not
And they can dress up.
Probably not
Yeah.
because they've seen the logo.
No. But I don't necessarily think it's only for
It's
children.
not. It's yeah.
It's just a stylized thing.
Yeah, the concern about it, and it's nothing against the design, it's about whether it fits its purpose, and that is whether or not it really represents the physical museum, the interior. If you think about the design in there, personally I don't think it does. And I think I can understand how you might think it's not an important thing, and the reason that I've written it in this way is that we won't spend any money on it. It's about what the museum represents and the values and how we'd like the public to perceive the museum, and then going forwards about making the branding really strong so that across social media, even letterheads and things like that, and obviously eventually museum merchandise, everything is consistent and coherent so that people recognise it, and hopefully we will, people might see the colours or the logo or something and know that is Sandwich Guildhall Museum.
Yeah, because I remember years ago, there used to be like mugs for sale, didn't they, in the museum? And they do look a little bit of their time, shall I say. And it'd be a bit of fun, to have mugs with a new logo on them.
Councillor Ripley.
I do think there's an issue that if it is over elaborate, or it can get just overwhelming really, and it can get terribly confused with other museum logos because they all seem to favour the same sort of design or what have you. So for me, the fact it's simple and I don't see it as childish, I just see it as a bit simpler. It's a simple design.
Yeah. I was the other option I had was I've always wanted. I always think it's quite important that the museum stands out on its own. So from my point of view, I would like to see the museum standing out as not a completely separate entity, but in its own right, apart from just being the Guildhall. Because I think quite often people sort of from outside the town, I know, say that that's the Guildhall, that's the Guildhall, that's the Guildhall, and everything gets sort of whitewashed with a brush that's got Guildhall paint on it. And although it is housed in the Guildhall, it would be nice to see the museum perhaps promoting what it's actually got to offer, and that it's not just come to the Guildhall. It could be quite easily forgotten from somebody outside of the town or a visitor thinking of coming here, that the Guildhall Museum is just a tour of the building. So I think from my point of view, I think it's quite important to have that individuality for the museum. And as we're taking it forward, or rather the museum coordinator is, so professionally, I think it would be good to match that professionalism with a new logo and a new colour scheme myself, something more professional. As I say, presently the comments have been it's slightly juvenile for the logo at the moment, so I would like to see something more professional myself. So.
But we're not just talking about the museum, are we? We're talking about the courtroom as well. And that is part, that is a real jewel in the crown of Sandwich. And it's somehow to get a reference to that as well. I was thinking, should we have a fierce looking 19th century judge as a but somehow we have to embrace or integrate the courtroom into the museum logo. But I am reminded of my previous employer, the University of Southampton, which spent a year actually deciding on its logo and landed up with a dolphin. And it was just crazy. And it only lasted about 3 years, and then we all went back into mad discussions that took days, weeks and months to come up with a logo which was totally planned and not a dolphin. And the main thing was that it wasn't a dolphin. So I would caution spending a lot of time
Perhaps we'll all have to have an idea then. Because I mean, when you think of the museum, you've also got like the three maces, you know, like the little maces,
Yes.
really old,
Yes.
and the town, you know, the badge and the chains and things like that.
Yes.
Exactly.
So you might be able to have a
Yeah.
just have say maces or.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they are wonderful.
The trustee survey has got a question about the logo, so you are welcome to give comments there. The volunteers also have that, a similar question. The other thing I didn't mention, or I think it's written here, that the idea is that if we produce, working with the volunteers, thinking about how people perceive the museum and obviously how they represent it, they spend most time in there, so I think it makes sense to involve them. To produce a branding guide that will then have to be approved, obviously, by the committee. So it's not necessarily that, you know, we're going to just come up with something. With the reasoning for all of that will be provided, and that part of that is that the guide will continue on as something that can be referred to in the future to keep things consistent. I mean, we've started using social media more, you know, on a regular basis, but if I then apply that colour scheme, what we really want is this kind of planning for changes within the museum. But that even so, basically the guide would allow, hopefully, for the kind of the way the branding looks from the outside and the way the museum looks from the outside to continue on, even if there were changes to personnel and things like that. The other thing is, hopefully, part of my role was related to the website being redeveloped, and it would support that, and it would also support changes to the signage outside the museum. So that's those two things, just to flag that it would. It means everything's consistent, basically. Just more consideration to colours and things like that will be used to represent the museum.
Indeed, thank you for that. I think that's very good. So the recommendation on this item is for members are asked to approve the request to work with volunteers to produce a branding guide for the museum, and that would also include a new logo. So is this committee so disposed to agree a branding guide and looking at a new logo? Obviously it would be decided, it would be brought back to this committee, but are we not, as Councillor Anderson said, not to be made a priority of over other more important work, but to be worked on in the short term?
I think if you are proposing that, I expect somebody will second it, but I will abstain.
Indeed, that's you're most entitled to. So did I have a seconder for the proposal to work with volunteers, produce a branding guide and look towards a new logo?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay then. So Councillor Franklin seconding that. And who's in favour of that going forward? Okay. And are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much for that. So that would be nice to see what comes back at a later meeting. Item number 11, something I'd rather term as Marmite, and this is the mission statement. Members are to receive the updated mission statement, and a decision is required on the mission statement. And this is attachment number 7, and I use the term Marmite because similar to what Councillor Anderson has said about branding, I've worked in a number of organisations where the mission statement was changed almost annually, and despite doing the same things, Canterbury City Council, etc., Kent County Council, they seem to change the mission statement every few years. Despite undertaking the same duties and services. So
I'm sure we're all very familiar with that.
indeed. So the museum coordinators quite nicely laid this out for us here, and and I was quite pleased actually to see the comparative statements that were put in as well. So I think that was exceptionally good. I really appreciated that from the other museums, because I had hoped to actually Google museum mission statements, but the time I was going to do that was sort of gone midnight one evening, so I was quite lucky to read further down the report and see that there was some here. And I think, from my point of view, is that they should be very punchy and to the point, and not sort of have any management speak, but more so be available to explain the essence of what you're doing to someone as young as perhaps 10 or 12 years old. I think is most important. So, but did we have any comments about Missing Zone? Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Ripley, please.
I've got no comments to make about it. I think it's excellent, and I think, and I propose that we just put it forward,
Thank you.
vote for it, and that's it.
That's good.
I thought it was
Councillor
excellent.
Ripley first.
Sorry, I thought it was excellent too, because if you read the other ones, there's so much waffle and soundbite, but this is to the point, so I'm fully in favour.
That's good. Are you seconding Councillor Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you. And Councillor Fortescue?
Well, I've got a very minor and doubtless pedantic suggestion to make, and that is that it might read in trust for the local community as well as for national and international visitors.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, okay,
Sure, yeah. That amendment
That makes
has been made. Is that okay?
yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
And so with that amendment, the recommendation here is members are asked to approve the updated mission statement for the museum. It's already been proposed by Councillor Anderson and seconded by Councillor Ripley. All those in favour?
Brilliant.
And anybody abstaining?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Item number 12, we have the collections development policy, and members are to receive the updated collections development policy, and a decision is required on this. This was attachment 8, 8A and 8B, and this is very, very detailed. I thought this was very, very good. When I was reading through this, it had a lot which I thought went into very good detail on this, so I'm very pleased. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I feel actually quite strongly that we're not just talking about the museum, particularly with reference to this document and to the other document on access. We are talking about the archives as well, and I would really like these documents to be headed Sandwich Guildhall Museum and Archives, because I feel the archives are as important an offer of the Guildhall as the museum. I speak as somebody who, in retirement, first started using archives and was actually completely transported by using archives. I'd never done it before, and it's a fantastic experience, and there are wonderful things in the archives here. I know because I found them. And I don't know, I mean, you spend weeks and weeks in archives, and I just feel that they are very important, and somehow that should be part of our presentation, our branding, or whatever you want to call it.
I'll go to Councillor Ripley and then I'll come back to the museum.
Aren't we including the archives in this report?
Yes, but it's not in the heading.
Oh, you just mean the heading, not the
It just says Sandwich Guildhall Museum. And I
But it
think
does
it
say
should say
collection.
Sandwich Guildhall Museum and Archives collection policy, and then also with the access policy, because that also refers to people using and looking at and reading documents. And I think it's more accurate to talk about museum and art.
Could I hand over to, I'd like to bring in the museum coordinator here because we actually had a discussion about this, and I think the museum coordinator's got a very good argument for how it is currently titled. So did you want to just...
So
what you
see in the actual policy and in the template that museums do have archival holdings. The word archive is used to mean a lot of different things. In a museum it means it's paper collection. We call it the paper collection in this document at the moment because for quite a while people refer, for example, to the attic as the archives, and we kind of would like to move away from the space representing that because obviously things are moving, and that's not really a professional archival space. The main reason is that the museum is accredited by the Arts Council. Everything that the museum has, all of the assets that are owned by the Tollbridge Fund, including the paper collection, including all of the items, are accredited or accessioned into the museum's collection. So they sit under this umbrella and are covered by this policy. Archives are accredited by the National Archives under a different scheme. They have a different way of managing things. We might use those, we might adopt some of their archival management that they use for the collections, including all of the paper items, but we are not accredited as an archive. And when you are accredited, you can become a place of deposit, such as the National Archives or Kent Archives, and there's legislation that covers what can be deposited in certain places. So there will be things that Kent Archives is allowed to take that we are not allowed to take because we're not a place of deposit, and we're not accredited as an archive. So it is about the public perception and understanding that. I think also, well, in the 2019 forward plan, there is a point that's flagged that the museum and archives are treated as separate entities. That is not, they're not separate. Everything we have is the museum's collection. It sits under that umbrella. And I think that's really important to understand. If we didn't have that collection, we wouldn't have a museum. So that is really, I think.
So you're saying that the accreditation policy for museums also covers archives, but that there's a separate accreditation for archives on their own?
No. So basically the Arts Council, the accreditation scheme, recognised that museums will have archival holdings. So a museum might have photographs or things like that we might consider an archive because they're paper items. So, for example, we have those things. We have a Magna Carta. That would be considered an archival document. However, that was the heart of why we got that funding for the museum. So they recognise that museums have archival holdings, but we're not an accredited archive. We don't follow the archival standard, which is complicated and different to the museum standard, even down to how things are stored. They have you'll know from using archives, they have a hierarchy system for how they document and store everything. We don't have that in a museum. As far as I'm aware, they don't have to do an object entry form when something new comes into the premises. We have to do that for every object we have, as per museum guidelines.
Every document.
Yeah, when I say object, I mean anything in the collection. It's just a phrase.
Okay, well, yes, I can see that point.
So in summary, from a professional point of view, the document is headed up how it should be, as a museum that's holding archival material. So, and on that note, I don't know if anybody else had any other comments on the actual policy at all. Councillor Fortescue.
Well, acquisitions. I've long thought that Sandwich could make more of the fact that Tom Paine lived in Sandwich. And the cottage where he lived in New Street is in fact being restored at the moment. And I've noticed that the plaque saying that Tom Paine lived here has gone back up on the wall above
Excellent.
the door. Now, I know the museum has to be very careful about acquisitions because of financial constraints and the fact that there's very limited space to display anything. But one thing that could be perhaps acquired is a contemporary 18th century print of Tom Paine. I'm sure that they must exist. And possibly a first edition or an early edition of one of Tom Paine's publications.
I've got that.
Women's female emancipation might be quite topical at the moment.
Yes, yes, yes.
There's a lot.
And Tom Paine, I mean, he's politically correct in some respects, anyway. So that's one point in his favour, perhaps. Another is that American visitors, or many of them, will have heard of Tom Paine, and some French visitors will probably have heard of Tom Paine.
Yes, and Lewis, we recently visited Lewis. Lewis makes a great song and dance about Tom Paine, but I think he was only there for about 3 weeks, whereas he actually lived in Sandwich for some time. Oh, was he?
Yeah, that Tom Paine's house in New, for many years they actually had a hanging sign outside. You know, you could see it. Tom Paine lived here. Then it changed hands, and the person that moved in didn't like that hanging there, so they put the plaque on the wall. But like I said, it does bring a lot of people in. But when I first started doing the museum, I was told that he was a stay maker involved with ladies' corsets. And then I've later found out that the thing that holds a mast up are called the stays.
Yes.
So it's to do with rigging. I think, but I prefer the tale about corsets. I don't know why. but the Americans do like him, don't they? When you get chatting there.
I think it could
Yeah,
be a big song and dance.
He's making tourists.
So we have an interpretation panel. I'm not sure if we have any references within the collection. I would say that because they're not on display alongside the panel that we don't, but I wouldn't like to make that assumption. We collect, so in the collections development policy it refers probably somewhere to important people within the town, materials of personal and private collections of significant figures and families in Sandwich. So he would fall under that category. What I would say is because we're carrying out inventory, we can't guarantee that we don't have anything. So in terms of active collecting, that's not something that we are doing. Obviously if something turns up that looks suitable and that we can consider if we had a duplicate, how we might use that in a different way, such as like a handling collection item or something like that, then we could acquire them, but we're not, because of the inventory, we're not really actively seeking items. So I think it's a good point to be aware of, and obviously if anything came up we would definitely consider it. And actually I recently discovered the People's Museum have a writing desk that belonged to him, which is very interesting to bear in mind for future projects if we wanted to borrow it.
I think we might think of an event which would relate to perhaps the publication of the rights of man or his birth, his death, whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for that. So, moving back to this document here, members are asked to recommend that the Sandwich Tollbridge Fund approves the museum's collections development policy. Is that something that people are happy with, having read through it and discussed the matter?
Yes,
I'm quite happy to.
propose that we
Super. And I'm happy to second that. So, and all those in favour?
Thank you.
Item number 12, item number 13 is the collections care and conservation policy. Members are to receive the updated collections, care and conservation policy. A decision is required on this, and these are items number 9, attachments 9 and 9A. And,
A lot of these things are not just museum, it's things like the paintings, isn't it? I'm very worried about those paintings in that room there, because they get a lot of, we spent about 10 years, a lot of money having them restored, and I'm very worried about the amount of light, especially in the afternoon sun. And there's that lady that was used to be in the jury room, if you look at her, she's at the end on the left, her eyes follow you around the room, so so when they used to do this ghost nights in here in the jury room, it's like it's a bit spooky, but I do worry about the light on the paintings in the gallery.
Yeah, so we will have a care and conservation plan. I've started work, so there is a set of benchmarks supplied by the National Conservation Service, I think, and I have already looked through that and kind of scored the museum against them, so they will form the basis of a plan for how we deal with collections care and conservation in the environment. One of the priorities that I would mention is that the museum environment is not what it should be, including the lighting, and I think that probably will be a priority, given that the Magna Carta is in there and has been for 6 years now, I'd say, under that lighting. But definitely I'm aware of the paintings and the concerns around items in the Guildhall. We might, in the short term, suggest a system of changing the artwork around, putting some in storage, putting some out instead. That's a good way to deal with it if it looks like it's going to take a long time to resolve.
Yeah, you talk about lighting, I went to Faversham and actually keep the Magna Carta in the dark room.
Yes.
They just turn the light on when you're in there.
yeah,
So we might be able to have sort of a monitor there, so if people walk by, the light comes on, and then people not there, it just goes off.
Yeah, we got some funding for equipment to measure the environment a bit easier. So we do have tiny tags, but they have to be taken out of the case, plugged into a laptop to see what is happening. So we have some digital ones in there now, so I can just see from looking in there what is happening in the environment. With that funding, we also got a light reader that will read UV as well as lux, or the light that we can see. That is something, so I have done some reading, but we need to really, it's a good, I think Christmas closure is a good opportunity, because I suspect the cases have UV film on them, in which case we ought to read the light from inside the case, so we need some time to be able to unlock them and do that. But I can definitely do that and get those figures so we can see what needs to be done.
I always remember there was a thing, like a dot system on some of the artefacts, like a yellow dot, and there were the priorities that if anything God forbid was to happen, that the caretakers which were supposed to be taken out first. Is that still applicable, or has that just gone by the years?
So we, for accreditation, and anyway, we should have an emergency plan. I would say it's probably about half written and updated. The previous one was fairly thorough, but they state a clear, workable emergency plan, and I felt that perhaps in an emergency it was not as clear as it could be. So I have, I'd say I've done about half of that. The priority salvage items, again, there was a very long list of items, and realistically it wasn't practical to be able, sometimes these are a priority, for example, but what they'd be a priority for removing as soon as we were told the building was safe, not, something is happening, let's try and get everything out, because it's just not, it's not fair, it's not health and safety and everything for people. So yes, but along with that, the emergency plan is quite a difficult document, because we have to have a salvage plan as well, which is how we treat everything afterwards, and obviously it's fire, flood, there's all sorts of different things. So but yes, you are. I will have to find all the stickers on everything and take them off, I think.
Town Clerk.
Yes, so just an update on that as well, because obviously council approved the extra panel that's to come at the front of the building. The cabling has been run for that, and the panel is on order, so it should be the next couple of weeks. So this is the fire service visited and said, actually the fire panel at the moment is under the stairs in the old part of the building, and actually if the fire brigade were called and an incident had happened, they would much rather that the panel was at the front of the building so they could see which part of the building. And next to this new panel, we should have a red locked cabinet with a salvage list in, so that if the fire brigade attend, they can open the cabinet and they can say instantly, these are the items that are priority.
Yeah.
So the fire brigade would,
Yeah.
if it's safe, they will remove items, but we need to give them that priority list. So me and Millie are working on that.
Brilliant, thank you for the update.
Well,
Councillor
it
Ripley.
sounds marvellous, but I haven't got a clue what you're talking about when you say a fire panel. What's that? Is that just a
Cabinet.
map?
So it's
Right.
the museum, it's an emergency plan, it's basically a big document and it goes through every sort of emergency we could have
Okay.
and how the procedures of how they should be dealt with by staff or whoever is in the museum. And then after that it's a salvage plan, which is how we rescue the objects, because for example if even if there's a fire and there's fire damage, they need to be treated. If there's water, obviously the fire brigade use water, then we need to think about conservation of those objects. Just because something is burnt in fire, we don't throw it away. It's still part of the collection and has to be dealt with as such. So that's all that is.
Councillor Town Clerk.
Yes, no, I think what Councillor Ripley was asking was what this panel represents.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
So the repeater panel that's going to be at the front of the building, where the main double doors, is going to be a replica of the main fire panel that's underneath the stairs in the old part of the building.
So it tells you where the fire
Yes.
is, where the alarm has gone
Yes.
in the building.
Yes, the seat of the fire.
Sectioned,
Yeah.
Section A, Section B, Section C.
Can I just, oh sorry, I was quickly. These are the paintings that bother me, of those to a lesser extent, but these ones in particular. I mean, they're quite important paintings, aren't they? And they're just open here, and anybody could come in and, you know, and I just, it just worries me that they're up there, you know, liable to possible damage or something.
These rooms are all locked unless used.
I know, but, you know, we do get members of the public in here.
Yes, that room, all of this is locked, so they can't get in here. Anyway, I believe as well. I don't know actually. Don't know security thing. I was going to say something about alarms, but I'm not going to.
No.
Yeah, all of these doors are locked. If
It's when
they're
people
not being
are
used.
allowed in and they are out
Yeah,
and about,
no,
it does
that
bother me
makes
a bit.
sense.
You
Yeah.
know, they're important paintings
They are.
and
I mean, it's very rare the council chamber is used, isn't it, for an event, again with the mayor's parlour. But no, I do see what you mean. We would have to think about measures in place in relation to security. In terms of damage, it's a tricky one to solve, I think, because other than having a member of staff here,
yeah.
but it's something to think about, definitely.
Councillor Anderson.
Yes, well, relevant to that, I think reading this document that I came across a suggestion, only a suggestion, not a recommendation, that the maces which are currently held in the museum, that there's a problem about opening and closing that cabinet.
Correct.
Maintaining it.
That was in the, I think that was in the update report in the first one, but that's fine.
Okay, well, perhaps I could make a point of, because it is relevant to this particular document, about securing those maces, because they really are spectacular. And the suggestion was that they might be kept in the courtroom. And then I thought, goodness me, how are we going to protect them? I mean, do you see them in a locked cabinet in the courtroom?
Yeah, the cabinets that are in the courtroom currently, they're locked, and it's not that all of the cabinets in the museum are locked and quite high security. It's just that to maintain the environment in a sealed case, we need to not open the door constantly, or as much as it gets opened. The seal on it is getting slightly damaged as well. So that's why, but they've always been a lot.
And would that locked, but they wouldn't be on display
Yes.
in the court, they would?
On display
So
in
they
the
would
cases
be
at the back of the court.
in cases which are presumably made of glass that cannot be smashed.
Yeah, the museum grade cases, the ones that are in the back of the courtroom at the moment, they will be in there.
Right. So nobody could smash them. And that's what
And
really worries me.
also public are supervised when they go into the
Yes,
courtroom.
I know, but you know, two
Is
people
this being
just
recorded?
attacked.
Councillor
Yes,
Fortescue?
it is.
Well, it should be, I'm not sure that this should be recorded. I mean, it's not, is it being broadcast?
If there's any security implications, then yeah, we should
Yeah,
desist from
yes.
concession, yeah, indeed. Perhaps it's something that we can be brought up confidentially. Thank you very much for that.
I'd just like to say prior to having a museum, they was all kept in the vault, so they've never shown at all, only on civic events or visitors used to come, but prior to that, so you only used to see them about 6 times a year. So at least they are on display in the museum.
That's true. So on this document, we're asked to recommend that Sandwich Toddbridge Fund approves the museum's collections, care and conservation policy as it currently is, that we've been presented to us this evening. So yeah, so I've got a recommendation from Councillor Franklin and a seconder from Councillor Ripley. All those in favour of this document currently?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's good to discuss these items. Councillor Fortescue stopped us before we went too far. And item number 14 is the water ingress in the museum. Members to receive and note a report regarding water ingress in the museum, and this is attachment number 10. And this was something, to tell you the truth, although I go in the museum on a semi-regular basis, I wasn't fully aware of this issue. Although I knew that there was problems with the guttering,
Yeah,
I didn't realise this was as severe as it's been
That's
shown.
issue, isn't it?
Incredible. So
The gutters all need cleaning out.
yeah. The only thing I wanted to ask the museum coordinator, so there's been some restorative works undertaken, I believe, from your report. Is that actually solved the situation, or are we actually saying we need to report to full council?
So we haven't done anything yet. We were ideally the wall needed to dry out slightly more, and then we had more rain. But the plan is to strip, because there's paper underneath it, so ideally remove that and seal it and then paint over it again. Which now I've sort of come to the conclusion that we can remove what's on the wall anyway and allow it to dry as it is. We have got signage in front of it and things covering it, and I think generally people understand. The custom wall that was there is still on display, we just moved it. So I'm just waiting for some caretaker time to start that. The gutter was sort of dealt with in the meantime, although I know that it's going to be done at the end of this month, probably. And it has rained since then, and it has really helped. So that is, we're working on it. Hopefully we'll be sort of on the way to sorting it by Christmas, and then we'll have to assess it as it goes, and hopefully the work we do will resolve it.
That's good. Well, thank you for that. I'll hand over to the town clerk, so I know she's got
Thank
some
you. Yes.
updates for us on this.
Just to let you know that the contractor has been scheduled for the 29th of November to come and clean all the gutters on the Guildhall. So that will be undertaken, and it's a professional company that do commercial gutters. So that should make a huge impact on the problems that we've had on the various areas around the outside of the building. We will have to monitor the situation, because it might be that the guttering sadly isn't fit for purpose for the building, and that might be that now we're experiencing higher volume of rain when it does rain. This is a big roof, You know, there is a lot of moss on the top and things that easily obstruct the gutter. So I think it's a situation that has to be monitored. And I'm hoping once we recruit the assets officer role, that will be something I can work with them going forward.
Indeed, thank you very much for that,
Yeah.
Town
I
Clerk.
was just going to say, I think it'll also be quite a time for that water, you know, to dry out. So it might be about 6 months or more, especially in the winter time.
Yeah.
But so you might be talking like next, you know, May time or something, May, June, before you can actually dry enough to redecorate it. Or you don't want to seal anything in it.
No.
You've got to dry away.
No, indeed, that's true.
Customer.
Yeah. As I
Can I
say,
excuse me, the customer, I've been reading some books lately, is it ever written out so people can read it? Because is there a copy? You know, I just wondered. No.
I
It's a
believe
fascinating
I might
book.
have some photographs of it, but I don't think it's been transcribed at all or
No.
translated. It would be a nice project to do in the future.
It would be, wouldn't it? It's like a daily diary sort of thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
1301.
are you volunteering, Councillor Franklin?
No, I'm not into ancient English.
Okay, so this has been discussed. Some remedial work is taking place on the gutters currently, and it is hoped that the assets manager will be in hopefully early part of the new year. So perhaps this could be flagged up to them as a priority, because this is something that we can't allow, you know, a public area to be getting to a condition like this. So hopefully this can be prioritised and flagged up as soon as possible. But let's see what the professional cleaning does towards the end of this month, and then perhaps assess the situation after that. And then, as Councillor Franklin said, a period of time to allow it to dry out fully. So
I just think, and I know Millie's completely got that under her control, or you know, looked at, is the electrics on that wall.
Yeah, we had an electrician in because I was concerned about it, and confirmed that there's no water inside the light switches. It's all safe. It has I don't know the right word, I want to say isolators, that if there was any problem it would just cut out. It's not going to cause any.
RCDs, that's right, yeah.
Is that's the same wall as in the Mayor's Corner, the Mayor's Parlour, isn't it? Is that okay? It's not hidden behind the panelling, is it?
No, it sticks out slightly, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
by the jury room there on that corner.
So it will be that corner, but no, it
There's
is the
panelling in the
gutter.
jury room, isn't there?
Yeah,
Drivers will drive on the panel.
it's the, it's a good question actually, but I think it's the gutter, it's where it's seeping through the wall, but I don't know if it's affecting
The jury
the
room.
top, because obviously it also seeps upwards from the floor, so I'm
Oh,
not sure.
that's a puddle.
That is a good
You might have a look at it.
think about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there is another area of the building just outside that is getting worse because I've been monitoring it.
Oh, yeah.
But I think clearing the gutters will definitely make a difference. So.
Indeed, thank you. So members are asked to note the information regarding the water ingress in the museum and await further developments after the gutter clearing. All those in favour? Oh, sorry. Would you like to? I'd like to recommend that we note the report.
Yeah.
And are you
Yeah,
to second that?
yeah.
And all those in favour of
Very
noting
good.
the report? Thank you very much. And just leave us the item number 15, date and time of the next meeting to be assigned by the town clerk in 3 months' time.
Okay, earlier than that.
Or earlier if,
Or
yeah.
earlier if required
Yeah.
due to the
Work.
the works that are required. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for all your advice and your discussion this evening. It was nice to see that everybody has got the museum's well-being at heart. So, and I'm sure as we go on, as was said, this being the initial one, there's quite a lot of work to look at on the initial one, but in future ones, I'm sure it will not be so lengthy. So,
And I
Councillor
think the committee should record its thanks to the museum coordinator for having produced such an impressive amount of documentation for this meeting.
Indeed, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
So good. Here, here. I say that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting closed.
And I close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Let's get some of that stuff back in the